Hello, my name is Heshie Zinman, and I am the newest member of the National Steering Committee of the Reunion Project. I want to welcome you all to the plenary session, which will provide a summary of the current political landscape for people living with HIV. Our goal today is to educate and inform you on some steps being taken by HIV community leaders to assure that the incoming presidential administration is aware of our needs. This session will cover two major topics, and I am honored to be joined in this plenary with the Reunion Project Steering Committee co-chairs Jeff Berry and Waheedah Shabazz-El. Recently, the U.S. People Living with HIV Caucus issued a letter to the Biden-Harris transition team on behalf of people living with HIV. The letter covers four major topics: accountability and leadership, stigma, discrimination, and criminalization, HIV as a racial justice issue, and meaningful involvement of people with HIV/AIDS, MIPA. The letter itself represents a great example of advocacy on behalf of people living with HIV. It's an impressive start for which we are deeply appreciative. However, we do know that there are many other issues that we're facing, some of which we're going to talk about here today. So we're going to begin first with Waheedah. Take it away, Waheedah.
Thank you, Heshie. I want to say that I agree with you that the caucus letter is a splendid example of advocacy on the part of people living with HIV, and I want to thank them for that. What I would like to point out before we begin is the impact of the social movement fueled by Black and Brown communities demanding safety and calling for an end to systemic racism, the impact that movement has had on the election itself. I would also like to highlight the work of many long-term survivors across the country that helped turn out the vote. Vote Positive USA their work was pivotal in many cities that had an enormous impact, particularly in those pivotal cities and states, I should say. One state was Colorado. Vote Positive in Colorado canvassed over 160,000 people and had direct conversations with over 21,000 people. In Pennsylvania, Vote Positive USA canvassed over 136,000 people and had direct contact or direct conversation with over 24,000 of those people. In Georgia, Vote Positive members monitored 10 polling sites in DeKalb and in Fulton counties. And in Houston, Vote Positive members reached over 126,000 Black and Latinx community members in Houston. They also did phone banking, and they actually texted over 34,000 voters. It is this power, it is this collective power that we need to keep sustained in order to push the Biden-Harris team into enacting and defending what people living with HIV need, such as Medicaid expansion, such as Medicare, Social Security, and of course, true social and economic justice. Lastly, I want to point out that PWN USA continues supporting Get Out the Vote because they're working in Georgia on the Senate runoff. Now in Georgia, they have been calling and texting folks in Georgia to get them registered to vote before the upcoming deadline, which was December the 7th, yesterday. So we want to thank Positive Women's Network for that. And I will turn it back over to you, Heshie.
So Jeff, what would you like to add with regard to other issues that we're facing as a community of people living with HIV?
So thanks, Heshie. And thank you, Waheedah. That's amazing. All those accomplishments that PWN and Vote Positive USA, did you get the vote out? It's so important. In addition, the administration, has other things that they need to focus on as well. And so now that we have them elected and they're coming into office, it's really going to be important for the Office of National AIDS Policy, or ONAP, which was established under President Clinton in '93 and coordinates the continuing efforts to implement the President's National HIV/AIDS strategy. but was effectively shut down during Trump's inauguration, or just following his inauguration in 2017. So it's really going to be important for the incoming administration to reestablish the office and appoint a new director, and prioritize older adults and long-term survivors, while recognizing that not all long-term survivors are older adults. As we know, many of our fellow survivors are folks who acquired HIV around or near birth, or early in life. So here in Illinois is one example. Last year, Pride Action Tank, SAGE, and Equality Illinois advocated for major legislation that would advance equity for LGBT older adults and older adults living with HIV. And Governor Pritzker here in Illinois signed the bill in August of 2019. The bill, which is Senate Bill 1319, makes Illinois the third state in the country to designate LGBT older adults as a population of greatest social need. And the first state in the country to designate older adults living with HIV as a population of greatest need. This is important because the majority of people living with HIV over 50 in the US are LGBT. It's also important that we pay attention to the needs of trans folks who make up 3% of people living with HIV here in the US. We still don't know a lot about treatment for trans people who are aging with HIV, and need to address other social determinants of health, such as homelessness, incarceration, and poverty.
Thank you, Jeff. So we also like to add that the passage of the Equality Act is a priority in the first 100 days of the new administration, which may or may not happen. But the Equality Act will prohibit discrimination for LGBT people. It's actually will amend the Civil Rights Act of 1965, I believe, and will allow actually for the first time across the states to begin to collect data on sexual orientation and gender identity, data that we don't have, data that we currently don't collect in this country, which will allow us to hopefully work towards eliminating health disparities and will result in greater access to care. The next major topic for today's discussion is the National HIV/AIDS Strategic Plan for 2021-2025, being drafted by the Department of Health and Human Services. Waheedah, could you please elaborate on this plan?
Yes, thank you, Heshie. So the Department of Health and Human Services is requesting and accepting public comment on this national HIV/AIDS strategy for 21. It's going to go through 2021 to 2025. You can check it out at hiv.gov. This is a call to action for our community. This is a call to MIPA, meaningful involvement of people with HIV, that each of us, either individually or in our groups, read the draft. We go to hiv.gov, read the draft, and then we can also identify what the gaps are, what's missing, and submit our comments directly to the Department of Health and Human Services. And you can do that again by going to hiv.gov. You can make these comments up until December the 14th, so we have another whole week even after this town hall today to read the draft and submit your public comments. So the National HIV/AIDS strategy has 4 key focus areas this time around: diagnosing people living with HIV early so we can get them linked into care, supporting all people living with HIV to achieve and maintain viral suppression and improve quality of life as we age with HIV, scaling up PrEP and support medication adherence, and addressing stigma and discrimination and other structural elements that inhibit people from getting tested and into care.
That's a lot of really good information, Waheedah. So we're going to wrap up this session with a couple of other calls to action for all attendees here from across the country. As Waheedah pointed out earlier, our collective power needs to be sustained in order to push Biden-Harris to enact and defend what people living with HIV need. Again, Social Security, Medicaid expansion, Medicare for all, really measures that will help us to achieve true economic and social justice. Jeff, what else do our Long-Term Survival Alliance need to be doing?
So thanks, Heshie. So yeah, in addition to the public comments for the National HIV/AIDS Strategy, which Waheedah just mentioned, again, that's December 14th. One action that we can all take at our state level, wherever we are, is to advocate to our local state legislators for inclusion of LGBT people and people living with HIV to be designated as populations of greatest needs, as was done here in Illinois. What that does is that allows more dollars to be appropriated for services for those populations. So it's really critical that we advocate to get those populations recognized as populations of greatest social needs, so we can get the funding and the money to provide more services.
Great, Jeff, thanks. Waheedah?
Yeah, so I want to circle back around to the letter that was sent to the Biden-Harris transition team by the caucus, by the U.S. caucus people living with HIV. And I'm going to ask those of you who are familiar with Twitter, because the letter was sent out to their transition team through Twitter. Those of you who have Twitter accounts, those of you who are familiar with Twitter, we're going to ask you to retweet and retweet and retweet that letter. We want you to bump it up. We want the letter to get some traction. So the letter's we're going to actually place the link to the initial to the first Twitter that was sent out by Malcolm Reed from Thrive. He initially sent it out. We're going to send you the link to that tweet, and then we're going to ask you to retweet it. And here are the handles that you're going to be using. So we'll put these in the chat box for you. We'll send you the link. Here's the handle: @Transition46, @Kamala Harris, @Joe Biden, @HIV Caucus, and @Reunion_project. So again, this is a call to action to help. Let's get some traction on the letter that was sent out by the caucus. Let's make them hear us. Let's make them recognize us by retweeting this letter out. Thank you.
And to reiterate what Waheedah said, these Twitter handles and link will be put in the chat box for you to copy. And so I just want to thank each of our panelists, the Reunion Project Steering Committee co-chairs, Jeff Berry and Waheedah Shabazz-El. This has been a great, informative session. I hope you've all found value. And now we're going to continue with the town hall and turn the program back over to the MC.